Thousands of Americans began protesting as early as 1962, 1963 against the war in Vietnam. Those marches increased up until 1968 when tens of thousands of people gathered in Washington. But until that street heat was measured and taken into the halls of Congress, the war in Vietnam raged on.
How do you ask a man to be the last man to die for a mistake?
Through the courage of Congresswoman Belle Abzug, Congress finally cut off the purse strings and used the power of the purse strings to end the war in Vietnam. It's that same energy today that we find in the occupation of Iraq. Despite the thousands of protests, popular polls that show majority Americans are ready to end this occupation, it will only be until we cut off the funding of this war, until we use the purse strings in Congress to end the occupation of Iraq, just as we ended the war in Vietnam.
Give us a real debate. Don't bring this piece of garbage to the floor. This is not honoring our troops. We're doing them a disservice. You are politicizing this war, and it is wrong.
Congressman Jim McGovern from Worcester, Massachusetts, introduced H.R. 4232, which was to begin the process to use the purse strings to cut off funding for the war in Iraq, to begin a swift withdrawal of our military, and to stop the military occupation of Iraq.
My bill basically says that we need to cut off funding for this war. Not cut off funding to the Iraqi people, not cut off funding to efforts to help the Iraqi people have a better life or to try to provide security through the international community. It says the United States has done enough damage. It is time to recognize this policy is a failure.
5 people were killed.
U.S. Marines killed 15
20 people were killed.
160 Iraqis were killed.
More than 600,000 Iraqis have died in violence since the U.S. invasion.
And I want to tell you, the president has focused in on my bill in particular as an example of what he means when he says that Democrats want to cut and run.
The party of FDR and the party of Harry Truman has become the party of cut and run.
I don't want to cut and run in Iraq. I believe we should support the Iraqi people. I want to support international organizations and agencies that will go in there and help the Iraqi people obtain a better life. I want to support United Nations efforts and international efforts to provide better security in Iraq. What I want to do is I want to end U.S. military involvement in Iraq now. Yeah. Not 2 years from now, not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now. Too many Americans have died. Too many innocent Iraqi civilians have died. Our presence there is not a calming situation. We have more troops there today than we did at the beginning of the year. We're going in the wrong direction. Things are getting worse. Even our generals are saying that our occupation of this country is used as a recruiting tool by insurgents to get people to fight against us. We have lost any popularity contest in Iraq. The majority of Iraqis want us out.
We want the immediate removal of all the occupation power.
Our standing in the international community has never been lower than it is right now. And I'm going to tell you, we have now created a situation where there is a civil war in Iraq.
Many believe that the civil war that everybody's been fearing has finally arrived.
George Bush tries to talk about this as if it's a battle against Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda.
The liberation of Iraq is a crucial advance in the campaign against terror. We've removed an ally of al-Qaeda.
He did that when he tried to justify the resolution to go to war.
Iraq has also provided al-Qaeda with chemical and biological weapons training.
And he lied.
We've had no evidence that Saddam Hussein was involved with the September the 11th.
But let me tell you one other thing. If you had a magic wand right now and you get rid of Osama bin Laden and every member of al-Qaeda, you would still have a civil war in Iraq because it's Iraqis versus Iraqis versus Iraqis. We got to start telling the truth in this country. And I'm going to tell you one other thing. It doesn't take a heck of a lot of courage for members of Congress or members of the Senate or the President of the United States to wrap themselves in the American flag and say, stay the course.
We must stay the course. We stay the course. We will stay the course.
Time will be our friend as we stay the course.
Because we're not fighting this war. And with very few exceptions, our kids aren't fighting this war. It is time for us to start doing the right thing. Stop worrying so much about saving face and maybe a little bit more time about saving lives.
For many of us in Progressive Democrats of America, we follow a rich tradition. We're standing on some pretty heavy shoulders. I think for myself, Paul Wellstone is probably the one person that really symbolizes for many of my generation what it is we're looking for inside the Democratic Party and outside of it. We've been very fortunate in 2 short years as Progressive Democrats of America to have such amazing heroes who are standing with us and heroines who are standing with us on those same shoulders. Cindy Sheehan, who single-handedly put the issue of the war back on the mainstream media.
It is amazing to me that we even have to have an organization called Progressive Democrats. Every single Democrat should be progressive. Every single Democrat should be opposition to the war crimes and the war criminals.
We're very proud that in Congress, some of the most outspoken leaders in the issues that have united Progressive Democrats have stood with Progressive Democrats of America. John Conyers, who stood with us in Ohio and who stood with us in the After Downing Street minutes, who's talking about real oversight, investigation, have Congress assume its role of accountability.
We know that we were told one thing in America, but in London, they were planning a war all the time.
The 2 co-chairs of the Progressive Caucus, led by Barbara Lee, who was one of the few Americans and few Congress members who had the courage to speak out when this war began.
PDA all around the country, as you know, is working very hard to take back our country in the name of democracy, and that's what this is all about.
In addition to Congressman Conyers and Representative Barbara Lee, one of the members who really stood up and organized the Out of Iraq Caucus, who's also a member of our National Advisory Board, is Maxine Waters. Congresswoman Maxine Waters has been one of those voices from the beginning who's spoken out against this war and has organized members of Congress to join the Out of Iraq Caucus.
It's a trap. It's an attempt to force Democrats to sign on to a resolution that will do nothing to bring our troops home. All they want to make us sound as if we're unpatriotic.
As part of our inside-outside strategy, we also have Reverend Lennox Yearwood, who was almost single-handedly responsible for registering over 1 million African-American youth in this last election cycle.
We will not send anybody home. We will not end any war if we continue to have segregated movements.
We have a very rich tradition inside the Democratic Party, and we're very honored that many of those, as we said, heroes and heroines who are standing with us today. Sign the petition, register to be a member of PDA, and organize and mobilize in your community. Be a part of the change.
There's something